Good morning, everybody. Let me get my camera turned on here. Hello. Hope all is well with you. We are getting started here in just a second. I am going to activate our live session and we will get going. Hopefully, everyone having a great day and off to a good start. So, let me first need to share the screen. There we go. Hopefully everyone can see that good. Okay. Hey, Bob. Just dealing with the technical difficulties here. We're getting started in just a second, so we'll get you going. Do, 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 do. All right, everyone, welcome again to Going on Offense, talking about taking advantage of opportunities in difficult times. There's a number of different subjects we're going to be talking about today. If you have any questions, by all means, pop them into the chat and I will answer them at the end of the session, as I can only see my slides and my screen at this time. So if you have any questions, again, pop them into the chat room and then we will deal with those at the end. So first of all, introduce myself. My name is Dan Paulson. I am the CEO of Envision Development International. I work with CEOs and executives and owners, for that matter, to figure out how to keep their companies growing and in some cases get them growing again. And I thought this would be an opportune subject to talk about right now. And my contact information is here. So if there is anything you feel like contacting me afterwards, please feel free to do so. You can give me a call at that number or visit my website at danpaulsonletsgo.com. So let's talk a little bit about the times that we are in. As I alluded to in the title, this is talking about volatile times, which is interesting because right now is not like any other period in history where we've seen signs of a potential recession, but many companies are actually doing quite well, except for different issues that are impacting their ability to sell or to grow. And some of these issues here are high inflation, for example. It's typically a sign of impending recessions when we see inflation spike up. And as many of you know, inflation has dramatically increased over the last couple of years due to a number of issues. And the primary one is lack of supply. Many people are lacking components to finish product or put product together. I know that because I'm waiting to buy a car, and right now you can't get one because you can't get the chips to power the cars with. So there's a lot of issues going on. And Bob, I know you're online here. We talked about screws, something as simple as a small screw that is so limited in where it's produced that it's impossible to replace that particular item. So you wait and you wait, and customers wait, and that seems to be the game that we've all been playing in the last year or so. This is a waiting process. With the supply chain issues, though, I'm hearing from people that sales are still pretty strong, which is, again, kind of bucking that whole recession trend. People have customers that have needs. They want to fill those needs. They have money to fill those needs. However, they aren't able to supply the products for whatever reason, and again, usually related uh, to missing components. So when you look at those aspects, it's hard to say that we're really in a recessionary time right now. But I would still say we are in a volatile time because until those components come in, we can't fulfill those orders. Until we fulfill those orders, we can't close the sales, and the process can't repeat itself. But here's the other side: is there really is a very low unemployment, and I think that is, regardless of what happens recession wise, I believe that is going to be something we are going to experience throughout this. So even if what they say is true and we are going into a recessionary period, we have 11 million jobs open as of last month. We have a 3.6% unemployment rate, which even in the best of times is really, really good. So there's a lot of jobs that are waiting to be filled that can't be filled because we don't have enough people to do it. Well, why is that? Well, there's a couple different reasons for it. One of the biggest reasons for it is we have one of our largest employment populations is retiring. They're aging out of the marketplace. Now, many of them stuck around through 2008 when that recession hit. And from what I hear from a number of them that I'm connected to, is we got to 2020, and with all the stuff with the pandemic, they just made the choice to get out of the market. They just decided, there's enough in my retirement. I can actually step back now. And they did. So we saw where we lost a lot of key people, really good talent that is no longer available in the workplace. Now, then there's the other side of it. We still have people coming up in the ranks, becoming employable, but there's a smaller group of them than there was before. So we're seeing a smaller population entering the workplace. And with all these positions that need to be filled, there's more positions than there are people available for them here in the US. So that's why we're seeing over 11 million job openings. Now, I didn't do enough research to say where all those are. From my past research, I would say a bulk of them are in more kind of that entry level or frontline positions. However, from my experience, I am also seeing where the mid tier and the professional positions are still shorthanded. So even if you have a position, say in engineering, in some cases IT, in some professional leadership positions, some key leadership roles, there aren't enough people to fill those spots. There isn't enough experience to go there. So we've seen experience leave the marketplace. So there's a talent deficit that way. There is a younger generation that's coming up in the marketplace, but in many cases, there aren't enough people in that, nor do they have the talent and the experience level that is the same as the people that are leaving. So you're seeing this tug and pull and challenge in a number of different ways. So while you see sales being really strong, there's all these tides against it, which is making it difficult for many businesses to grow and to thrive. Some are doing extremely well. So this isn't a case where everybody is in the same situation all the time. And that's something we need to keep in mind. When I'm talking about volatile times, there's a certain level of volatility in every business all the time. Some businesses it impacts at different times than others. So in some cases, there are businesses that are doing extraordinarily well right now, while other ones are struggling for the various reasons we've discussed. And to kind of highlight this, I wanted to share a story. And it's a story that some of you here in Wisconsin will appreciate. Some of you elsewhere might not. But I thought it was a really good business analogy of how this all works, and from something that most people can understand, because most people are familiar with professional football, and many people, I would assume, are familiar with the Green Bay Packers. Now, is something near and dear to my heart because I am from Wisconsin. I am also a Packers owner, and we'll get into that a little bit more. But the story of the Green Bay Packers really highlights dealing with volatile times and working through that. And that's what I'm going to share here quickly today. So I'm not going to get into a ton of the details on the Packers. We could talk about that for hours on end, which for you Bears fans out there would probably bore the crap out of you, or might even cause you to get off the webinar here. But I at least wanted to go through the business case of how the Packers came to be and the ups and downs that they've had. So the team as a whole is one of the oldest franchises in in the NFL. They started way back in the 30s, I believe it was. Again, I'm going to abbreviate a lot of stuff here, but Curly Lambeau was the person who started the team as football was starting to gain hold here in the U.S. And starting to grow in popularity. And he started a team and had the Acme Meat Packing Company in Green Bay sponsor them. So they were the Acme Packers at first. And actually, early on in their development, they went through a very difficult time. In fact, the team almost folded. And if it wasn't for the help of actually Bear Bryant, I believe it was, and also some creative financing, which I'll talk about in just a second, the Packers probably wouldn't be in existence today. So early in their career, they're trying to build momentum. There's a cost to doing business, and they were struggling to make those costs. And the Packers did something unique that not any other team in any other professional franchise has ever done. And that was they sold stock. And they sold stock to the average Joe. So that stock doesn't provide you a lot of value per se. It's more like a fan tax is what I call it, because while you have ownership in the team, you don't have all the same rights as if you had owned stock, say in Microsoft or Tesla or anything like that. So they were able to raise funds to support the team early on through the sale of stock. And they've done that periodically throughout the years, which has made them very viable. Because if you look at the Packers as a franchise and compare that to other professional sports franchises, there's a lot of things that would go against it. For example, Green Bay is a small town. They are a very small market town, approximately 100,000 people. Typically, a town that size cannot support a multi-million-dollar franchise that's worth billions and keep it there, because if it was a single owner, that single owner is going to go to where they can increase the revenue, increase the money. But because of the unique situation where the team is essentially owned by the fans, the team can never move. It is landlocked into Green Bay, and it will be there forever. And that's a very unique situation in the sport. It's also created this strong sense of loyalty amongst the people that are the fans of the team. So it's unique at how they were able to early on work through some of those challenges. And what happened over the course of I would say the first third of the Packer franchise lifetime is they were able to become one of the dominant players within the NFL. They actually won the first 2 Super Bowls. Before that, they won several national championships. So they were actually the tour de force. And of course, everyone knows Vince Lombardi or has heard of Vince Lombardi. He was the recognized coach of the Packers in the 50s and early 60s, and he really developed the team into the powerhouse that it was. But then you get to the late 60s through probably the mid to late 80s, and things had changed. And what we saw was there was this dark period where the Packers were a terrible team, terrible coaching, terrible players. In fact, if you were ever sent to the Packers, it was often a joke in the 80s that was where your career went to die. So it was often a threat that if you didn't play better, or you didn't do better, or you didn't comply with the team rules, we would sentence you to trade you to the Packers. And that was at the time, again, punishment almost worse than death when it came to a career. So what really changed? What turned that around? Well, in the early 90s, we had a situation where they hired in a new general manager. General manager's name was Ron Wolf. And he recognized that through leadership and a number of other issues that we really had to turn things around. Coaching was kind of stuck in the past. The Green Bay Packers were doing a lot of stuff based on their heritage. They were living backwards. They weren't looking forwards. And that created a problem because it made poor hiring decisions. It also wasn't run quite the same because of the nature of its design. So that caused some problems. The first coach out of the gate after Lombardi that most people would remember is Bart Starr. Bart Starr was a great quarterback under Lombardi. He was not a great coach. Now he's been endeared by his fans and passed away a few years ago. But as a coach, that's not what he's remembered for. You often won't see anyone bring that up. They'll talk about his playing, but they won't talk about his coaching. And there were a couple other coaches, Lindy and Fadi. And anyway, they had about 4 coaches up until until the 90s when Mike Holmgren was hired. Mike Holmgren, stronger coach, better, which led to better outcomes. They also had to get better players. They drafted Brett Favre, which, again, Hall of Fame quarterback. They brought in Reggie White, which was already a Hall of Fame player, and they won him over. And all of a sudden you see the shift where the Packers is no longer becoming the team to dread. It's actually becoming the team to look up to or to respect. And really, since the early 90s, that's where the Packers have been. And they've done there have been a number of ups and downs. Like I explained earlier, there's challenges related to a small market team. How do you stay viable as time goes on? And that led to more stock sales because they recognized that they couldn't live in the past if they wanted to continue to grow. So they turned Lambeau Field, the field that's probably one of the most recognized in the NFL, to more of a all year round tourist destination. And that also increased revenue in other ways and allowed the venue to support the team and keep the team viable. And it's led to other stock sales. I believe the most recent one was actually last year, where people were still able to purchase stock. And now they had their shareholders meeting yesterday, and they talked about what it's like to or what they're doing with that money. And it's going to continued improvements in the facilities and also making Green Bay, or at least the area around the stadium, even more attractive to year-round visitors versus just during football games. So there's a lot of different things that were done related to leadership, related to talent, related to bringing back discipline to the team, looking at investment, putting money back in even when it might be difficult to do so, and looking forward, not looking back. And I think that's where many of us as leaders often get stuck, is we're often looking at what was the history, the analytics, the numbers. All that is looking in the rearview mirror. Instead, while we need that data and that information is important, we need to take that information and say, how does this support us in the future and what needs to change? And if we get stuck in that rut of what we've always done, we will continue to be where we're at, or worse yet, go the wrong direction. So the first step, though, we've got to talk about really is managing your resources. So you might think that you're a world-class soccer team, but maybe you're playing on a dirt field and you really don't have everything you need to accomplish what you want to accomplish. That's not uncommon. We have limited amount of resources. We have limited time, we have limited talent, we have limited money, and we have to figure out how to balance all those things in an optimal way to get the results that we want. And that's where you really have to strategize and look effectively, looking forward, not looking backwards, looking forward to say, where do we need to put these resources to make the biggest bang for the buck? Because ultimately, we can only accomplish so much with what we have. For example, I was talking with a client earlier today, and we were talking about position. He's growing a new division. He's looking to expand in an area that was very important to achieving a higher rate of profitability. In one part of his company, it's very competitive, which then is price driven. This other part allowed a lot more flexibility with profitability growth. The challenge he's had is his primary person, who has been in that industry for decades, knows the industry very well, is also reaching a point where he can't physically do the job in the same way that he could in his youth. Well, now there's a choice. If you want to grow the business, you can get it so far with this person, but to really get it to where you need it to be, you're going to have to hire somebody else. And usually what I find happens is we wait till that perfect time. So perfection is a big thing in business. We want to do it when it's just right. And we end up in a situation where maybe we hold off on hiring a person because we don't have the money for it right now, or we hold off on buying that piece of equipment because financially maybe it's not the right time. And we have to look again at the broader, bigger picture, looking ahead to say, how does this change the organization if we brought that equipment, that person, that marketing, whatever it might be, in now? And the answer often is, when you look past the fear of what's holding you back, you really need to make that leap earlier than later. You need to make that commitment. You need to, in the Packers case, sell that stock, get the community involved. You need to hire that coach that is going to cost you a heck of a lot more money than than just getting anybody who's willing to fill the job. You need to pay for the talent because that talent is going to support you long term. So you need to really look at what you're doing and how you're doing it. And this is where that looking forward and managing your resources becomes important. Now, what are the resources you should manage? Well, I alluded to that back when we were talking about the Packers. To me, one of the most important ones you should address first and foremost is leadership. Leadership is really what's going to drive the organization because ultimately we are still an employee driven company. We still need people, we still need talent to get the work done. And the biggest struggle that I'm finding with most businesses, other than being able to get supplies or materials, is being able to get people to do the job. So if you don't have the right people, that maybe that person is a procurement specialist, for example. They can go out, they have connections in the industry, and maybe they're the ones who can find you the parts. So there's a lot that needs to be done when it comes to keeping your people happy. And it starts at the top with leadership. Because if there isn't good communication, if there isn't a forward looking vision, if there isn't an opportunity for growth, your employees will see that. And they're going to make choices. The good ones are going to probably make the choice to leave to go to somewhere else where they might see an opportunity. And they'll go after that opportunity. With the rest of them, maybe they're just going to wait it out because your least qualified talent is probably going to be the last ones to leave. So they'll be the ones sticking around the longest, which is then going to affect the success of your business, the profitability, the discipline, the growth. Everything is impacted by those people. And if you're going to manage that, you got to really look at staff turnover, and that again stems from leadership. And I'll get to that with the next slide. It's a seller market in labor right now. So if we look backwards, again, 11 million people looking, or 11 million job openings last month. That's a lot. That's a lot of jobs to fill, even in a time when things are cooling down a little bit as far as the market and the economy are going. There's still 11 million positions open that are waiting to be filled. Well, what do you think is going to happen if things do turn down? Well, there might be fewer positions that are left open, but people are going to keep the talent that they have. And ultimately, there's probably still going to be positions that needed to be filled. So it's really a seller's market right now. You as the employee or an employee can really drive, certain aspects of their job. So we have to really look at how we're managing leadership to attract and retain the talent that we have. And you really have to make yourself the employer of choice. If you look back on the past seminars I've done, I've talked a lot about that. Being the employer of choice is really what's going to attract people to you versus you trying to chase down the talent that you're looking for. So making sure that you are the employer of choice is key to success. And it also means building a great culture. And here's an example of what I mean. So this is a McKinsey company study, and I just happened to trip over it the other day on social media, but it lays out very good. Why do people leave the jobs that they're at? Well, I believe it's 41% of the people surveyed leave their jobs because of lack of career development or advancement. So they don't see anywhere else to go. It's a dead-end job. They're doing a task, and they don't see any personal growth that's coming their way. The next one is inadequate total compensation. So again, companies that are doing quite well or quite profitable, some of that profit has to be shared with your employers or employees. And it's going to be key. It's going to be key that you make sure you're competitive as far as wages, especially with inflation going up. As it turns out, I believe most wages went up about 5 or 6% over the last year, when inflation's almost at 10% now. So even with a 5% raise, you took a 5% pay cut because everything is costing so much more. And we have to be aware of that. If we're not providing the right compensation and benefits, it's going to be easy for people to look for someone who will provide those. Uncaring and uninspiring leaders. This goes back to my last discussion. It is so important that you have the vision looking forward and that you are able to share that passion and that purpose with your team as to why this company matters. What makes your business unique? What problem do you solve in the world? And how do you make the world a better place? We have a whole generation that is keyed into understanding how that impact, how what they do in fact affects that impact, and how that impacts them as well. So we really have to look at that. Lack of meaningful work is another one that people really don't want to do, and especially if we have a number of people who are working remotely. If you aren't in the office, you can't really see what they're doing. Plus, it might also be a sign that things are more task driven. So we need to find that balance where teams can work together. And some of that does require people to meet in person. It's going to be challenging to run everything remotely. Some companies can get away with it. Some companies are well structured to do that. However, developing teams still requires that human element, and that requires getting people together, which means you have to really look for ways to bring meaningful work to the table that as a team we can work together towards a common good. And that's going to take, again, caring and inspiring leaders, coaches, not delegators. Uh, Unsustainable work expectations, again, giving somebody too much, expecting too much, and limiting their ability to accomplish that. So, um, people aren't like machines. You can usually ramp a machine up to produce a greater output. However, that's not always going to be the case for people. There's a certain limitation of what they're able to accomplish, what they're able to do, and that goes back again to leadership. So pretty much everything that I've shared so far, and you can read through the rest of these, really impacts your ability to lead. And if you can lead effectively, if you build a great culture, you surround it with great talent, and get that talent working together effectively, remotely and together, you will find better success when it comes to keeping those people on hand. And it will also, the word will get out. The word will get out, and you will start attracting people to you versus you having to chase down other people. And we've seen that in a number of different industries. So it goes back to that forward thinking. We need to be strategic. We need to look ahead. We need to find those opportunities. We need to focus on what we can be extremely good at and with whom we can provide that product or service to that's going to make the greatest impact. All too often, I see business leaders cast a very wide net. They don't want to let anything through, so they want to get out and get as many people as possible because of that fear that they might isolate themselves to an industry that, again, in volatile times, all industries have their ups and downs and they're at different times, but we need to manage how many different industries we're going after. So one industry might be way too narrow, but 100 industries might be way too much. And the wider you cast your net, the shallower that net goes and the fewer fish you're going to pull in with it. So we really have to, again, focus on who is our best target, why are they our best target, what can we do to change their productivity, their performance, their outcomes in a positive way, and how do we communicate that, and how do we communicate that effectively? So it's, again, back to that vision, that purpose, that values, and getting really laser focused on what you want to accomplish. So we got to quit living in the past. We got to quit looking back and saying, well, this used to work for us before. Maybe it doesn't work anymore, or maybe it needs to be retooled to be more effective. We need to focus on what we want as leaders. So we need to talk about, as leaders of an organization, what outcomes do we want to create? We need to stay dialed in on that. And then we need to get our team dialed in on that as well. Focus on your strengths, not your weaknesses. Be aware of what your weaknesses are, but really concentrate on what makes you do exceptionally well. That's really where your differentiator comes in. Got to stay positive too. We've got to be focused on what we're doing to keep everyone set on the common good or the common goal. And we often, as leaders, look at everything that's wrong, everything that's broken, and that permeates the organization. It changes attitudes, it changes mindset, and it makes it more difficult to work forward. So you really have to understand what you're doing and how you communicate impacts the outcomes that you get. And the more negative communication that goes out there, the greater likelihood that you're going to have issues in the future. and you're going to lose people because people don't want to be in that negative Nelly mindset all the time. They want to see opportunity. They want to see growth. They want to see vision. They want to know what they're doing is making a difference, and then they can see the reap the rewards of that change. So we really need to look at how we're approaching things from a communication side, staying positive but being real, because I don't believe blowing sunshine up everyone's hoo-ahs is going to change anything unless you are actually proactively taking action to improve those areas. So it's keeping positive but being real about that positivity as well. And staying laser focused versus a broad target. I talked about that earlier. And then having a working plan. So strategy development is very important. All too often, organizations create a very complicated plan that is never used. They check the boxes by writing a strategic plan. It comes in a nice big 3-ring binder with a ton of information in it. But the issue is that it's not usable. It's not a working, living document that can be adjusted. I personally recommend boiling a plan down to 3 to 5 pages and then having a working 1 page quarterly document that is updated regularly, reviewed, adjusted, and then changed for moving into the next quarter. And by doing that, you're constantly looking at the flow of business. You're constantly looking at the important numbers or the important metrics that you need to track, and you're also producing a better outcome because there's a greater sense of urgency when you're working within a 12-week window versus a 12-month or 24-month window. It's all too often easy to fall back into our old habits or say, we'll worry about that next month. Well, when you have to get stuff done in a matter of 3 months, it's going to be a big difference. And each of those 3 months sets up the following 3 months after that. So that's really where creating a working plan is going to be critical. If you'd like to talk about that more, again, I'll have my information at the end. Feel free to give me a call. Happy to set you up with that. We also have to look at investment. So as we listen to the news out there, and this is important as we're talking about volatile times, because sometimes those volatile times are created by our news media and the information we receive. I tell you, you have to communicate in a positive way to your team. Well, news doesn't make money by communicating the positives. They tend to make money by communicating gloom and doom. So they tell you that things are going to slow down, that work is going to change, that interest rates are going to go up, that people are going to get laid off. All those things, while they may happen or may be true, they don't happen to everybody. And you have a choice to either follow the information that they're sharing with you or to chart your own course. And part of that is often see companies that they start cutting back on investments. They start stockpiling money, and it's good to have a reserve. And I strongly encourage businesses, business leaders, and even individuals have a cash reserve built up because you never know when you might need that money for something that is more of an emergency or to sustain yourself during a slight lull in the business. So yes, you do have to have cash set aside. However, all too often we pull back the reins too tightly and we miss out on some great opportunities to really grow the business. Because if you think about it, if all the companies out there are listening to the same information and then making the same choices, which is to pull back and hold on to cash and reduce advertising and not hire people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, the one person who steps forward and says, "No, we're going to buck the trend. We're not going to follow that. We're going to look for opportunities to invest wisely, and we're going to bring in key people. And we might even spend more money on those key people, but those people are going to make a difference. We're going to spend more on marketing because now we can get marketing way more cost effectively than we could when times are high and everybody's advertising. We're now going to take advantage of where the market's at, and we're going to go out there and we're going to spread the word. We're going to be our own best evangelists. We're going to get out there. We're going to invest money in people because we want to keep our talent strong. We want to keep them sharp, and we want to keep them, most importantly, here working for us. So we're not going to cut back on training or coaching. We're actually going to put more money into that. We're going to look for ways to optimize. So over time, in any situation I've found is systems are developed, then systems are edited with changes or when changes happen. And pretty soon we have this patchwork of systems that is held together by duct tape and wire and everything else. And while it worked at the time, it's also now not as efficient as it could be. So it's important for us to review our processes and make sure we're working in the most optimal way possible. We need to do that in order to be effective as an organization. This is going to help cut down waste. Well, when you cut down waste, you can reapply those profits or that money to things that will make a bigger impact. And this is the reinvestment part of it. Automation might be the key. As I mentioned, there's 11 million job openings. There's not enough people to fill those positions. You might have to look for different ways to automate, to simplify, to have a machine do it. So you might need one person to run 10 machines where you might need 10 people to do the development or do the building of a product, which can be done by one robot. So you got to look for different ways to do that. Yes, it's a big capital investment, but the payoffs could be long term much better than if you just continue to do what you've always been doing. The last one I want to talk about here is outsourcing. There's not enough people, but you need to tap into that good talent. Well, what's another way you can do that? For specific jobs within your organization, it might be better just to outsource to a contractor. Find somebody who can do that task or that job, that process, but can do it remotely, can do it on their own time, can do it probably more effectively than even sometimes hiring a person in could. So there's lots of different ways here where you can manage that investment, you can control some of that cost, because even when you're outsourcing, even if you're paying more per hour for that outsourcing agent, the greater likelihood is it's still a lower cost because you're paying that person when they're doing the work and you're not paying them when they're not. And you're also not carrying benefits or anything else like that. So there's a lot of benefits to looking at outsourcing as well. And that's where you got to be open-minded and really look for, from an investment side of things, where do you put that money? What buckets do you put that in? And also, where do you spend your time? Because again, if you can get things off your plate that somebody else can do and they can just produce results, that's going to be far more effective than you micromanaging the process all over. That leads back to the talent, getting the right people in place. So whether it's an outsourcing person, whether it's a full-time employee, whether it's a part-time employee, more importantly, when you're hiring leadership, you really need to look for those opportunities. Of course, I always encourage start from within, start in your company, find those key people in your business that are the better people to move up. And not everyone you need to move for the same reasons. So often what we see in organizations is the people that tend to move up the ladder are the ones that are really good at their job. They're the widget builders that do an acceptable job at that. Well, you're changing their work dynamics. When somebody's a widget builder and now you're making them a leader, they're no longer a widget builder. They are now the leader of the widget builders. So you take them out of their core strength and you get them to manage others. Now, sometimes this works very well. You have certain people that are very good communicators, very good delegators, very good coaches that can really pull the team together and do that. But there's a lot of people that are really good widget builders that should probably stay widget builders. So then you have to figure out how to maximize their benefit by staying in that job or finding something that is more in tune to, again, where their strengths are at. Because people want to grow in their positions, but growth doesn't always mean changing positions or going upward mobility. So this is where understanding your team, being effective with that team is going to be very important. And that comes from great leaders who are coaches, not managers. Managers sit around and they spend their time delegating tasks and managing tasks and not managing the people part of it. The most important job when you hire a leader, a supervisor, a VP, whatever it might be, is their job is to manage the people, not over dictate the process. Career opportunities need to be left open. There needs to be a seen path for growth. So when somebody is hired, they need to know where their next possible steps could be and the different ranges or dynamics that would go with that. We also have to look at benefits. As I mentioned, a lot of people got a 5% bump in their salaries, but there was a 10% bump in cost of living. So you really need to look at how effective you are being with that. And sometimes payroll costs are just going to go up because in order to keep that talent or in order to get that talent, you really need to make the investment. Now, I will say this, if you're going to make that investment, make sure you're making that investment on the right people. And that is extremely hard to do, especially when they aren't in your organization. So hiring from outside You really have to look at how those people are going to fit. And often we get stuck looking at technical skills. We fail to look at the behavioral sets that really truly impact the organization as a whole. Do they line up culturally? Are they a good fit for our organization? Do they have share the same values? Do they see our vision? Do they want to follow our vision? Or are they just going to come in here and do tasks because they do those tasks really well? One's going to exceed far better than the other. And you have to look at that flexibility. Um, the world has changed in the last couple of years, and I think people are looking for more flexible options when it comes to work, especially in more of the office related positions where maybe it doesn't make sense for them to be in every day of the week. Now, I will say this, it also doesn't make sense for them to often be 100% remote. It disconnects them from the team, and while you'll see them doing tasks, are those tasks all that need to be accomplished, or is there a greater good that needs to come out of it? Now, I've seen companies where they have demanded that people come back to work because they want that interaction. I was actually talking to a friend of mine who their company had said, well, you need to come back to work and we'll be flexible on days you come back, et cetera. But we want to keep that team atmosphere and build that collaboration as well. And what ended up happening is she would go in the office and she and her people would be the only ones there. There wasn't anyone to collaborate with. They were all doing the same work. They were just now doing it in the office and they were doing it at home. So to me, that was a missed opportunity. It was probably with the best of intentions, but it wasn't really designed in a way to be effective to keep the people engaged and collaborative. So that is something you really need to look at. Um, Also, outside of the company, I strongly encourage leaders, executives, owners, you need to build a little black book of talent. So maybe you don't have an opportunity right now. That doesn't mean you will never have an opportunity to hire good talent in the near future. And the only way that I have found that's truly successful in getting the right people in is having a network of people that you've already built relationships with, that you understand how they work, you understand what's important to them. They've openly shared examples in a non hiring situation because once you interview them for a job, things change a little bit. So you really want to build a network of people around you for opportunities in the future, either near future or distant future. And having what I call a little black book of talent is a great way to do that. So having those conversations, LinkedIn is a wonderful tool to develop that. Going out on LinkedIn and building connections with people who might be a good fit for you at some point in the future and getting to know them, having them getting to know you, and then when you see or hear an opportunity, making that decision there can be very helpful. All this comes around discipline. Now, people misunderstand that the lack of discipline is greater freedom, and I would say it's the opposite. The more discipline you have, the greater freedom you will get. And what do I mean by that? Well, when you lack discipline in an organization, people lack responsibility, they lack the ability to meet deadlines, they lack that urgency. Maybe systems again are in dire need of optimizing. Maybe something's going on that needs to be adjusted internally to make the company run more effective, but we just kind of let it slide. And we let it slide for a number of reasons. We believe we're too busy. We believe it's not that big of a deal. We have other things we need to worry about. And again, if sales are going gangbusters, all hands on deck to bring the dollars in the door. Well, it's a lot of the little things that go on in an organization that can often lead to its downfall in the long term. And during volatile times, what tends to happen is because all the good stuff goes away, you still have all the nagging problems that were never addressed because there wasn't any time to deal with them. Well, guess what? Those problems become much greater issues when sales drop, when profitability goes down, and now you have to address these. And I've seen situations, and this was very true back in 2008, where companies really had some major problems to address that should have been taken care of when times were high, but they didn't. And then when everything hit the fan, they didn't have the resources to do it. So now they're in dire situation because they can't fix those problems because they lack the financial or the people or anything to get those situations turned around. That then means that everyone needs to work twice as hard for the same amount of money or less, which led to a whole nother issue. And then we saw a stagnation of wages for several years, which led to greater employee dissatisfaction. That's a subject for another time, but those are examples of where we really need to look at how we are disciplined as an organization, how we make sure we do what we say what we do, we follow through, and we do it in the best, most efficient way possible. Optimizing processes. We should do a process review at least once every couple years in different teams and different departments to look for ways that those processes can be improved. Maybe it's new technology. Maybe it's just looking at where we put in redundant systems, which we thought were necessary at the time, but now have bogged down quality and workflow. There's a lot of different things that you can look at in order to make those changes happen. We should question everything. And a lot of times we make assumptions that this is good or that is good. We don't need to touch that. I strongly encourage you that at all times we should be questioning, is everything we're doing to the best of our ability in the most efficient way possible? And is it helping our team grow and be strong and make us even more profitable in the future? And I would guess if you're truly sincere about it, you're going to find that in almost every aspect of your business, because of change over time, something's going to be different, and you have the ability to adjust. This is where automation can come in too. We really have to start looking at areas where we can automate that makes the most cost-effective sense. Maybe it's new software, maybe it's AI, maybe it's a new machine. Again, back to the outsourcing as well. Outsourcing could be a great way to handle certain priorities in business that really don't require somebody to be internal to do it, but having that outside expert in marketing and IT, even in some manufacturing situations, in some operational situations, can be done on a remote basis or on a hourly basis, where you don't have to acquire the full cost of having that person in there that full time. So those are all options that you need to look at when it comes to that. So what have we learned? Well, I hope what you're taking away from this is culture is the difference between great and average. So there are many companies out there that are successful in spite of themselves. They might have the right product at the right time. It might be at the right price, which then, again, all those things are very good. But now you reach that problem of growth over time. And what many of these companies do is they get to a certain point, they hit a plateau, and then they have to break through that plateau. The only way to do that is they have to change how they're doing what they're doing and with whom they're doing it with. So we have to look at how we change that culture to make sure it is optimal. It is the culture of choice. It is creating the company of choice. It is attracting the right people in for all the right reasons. We have to focus on leadership first. Above all else, getting the right people at the top of the chain can make a tremendous difference on the success overall. We need smart forward thinkers. We need positive coaches. We need people who can motivate and retain talent. We need people who can look at problems, who will question everything, who will challenge the status quo, who will make the difference between where you are and where you want to be. And if you don't have those right people, you either have to change those people or you have to coach the people you have to be more successful. So that's going to be critical. We have to look at ahead instead of living in the past. Well, all those numbers are important, all those P&Ls. It's great to look backwards and say how well we did and what did we do well with. Ultimately, we still have to look out the windshield instead of in the rearview mirror if we want to know where we're going. So I strongly encourage you, if you haven't reviewed your strategy recently, if you haven't created an effective strategy that you can use and is dynamic and is a living document, you really need to look at how you change that. You need to be more effective in getting that messaging out, that purpose out, those values that guide you. All those elements lead to success in the long term. Invest in others as they retreat, or invest as others retreat, excuse me. So that's where, if there's a lot of negative commentary out there, a lot of negative news, everyone's going to start pulling back. We're already seeing some of that happening. Well, you have a choice now. You can either follow their lead and pull back with them, or you can step forward and say, you know what, I'll let them back up. We're charging ahead, but we're going to be very strategic about how we do that. We know who we're going to go after. We know what products or services we're going to sell, and we know how we're going to target it, because that is what's going to make the difference. And it's going to also involve taking some risks along the way. but you got to manage those risks effectively. And this is why having a dynamic strategy really allows you to test certain things and decide if you move forward or you step back without spending a great deal of time and resources, because we tend to get emotionally tied into something, and that causes us to charge ahead because we don't want to lose, and we make poor decisions, and then that costs even more money. So there's different ways we can do this that allows us to test waters and gain traction or pivot if we need to. And we got to spend a lot of time sharpening that saw. We got to put more into our talent. We've got to educate our talent. We've got to spend a lot of time educating our leaders. We got to get very disciplined in what we are doing, because it's through that discipline that we get the outcomes that we need. So that's all I'm covering today. Took about 50 minutes to get through that. Just want to share my information here again. You can reach me at the number on the screen, or you can visit danpaulsonletsgo.com. Feel free to schedule a meeting with me. I'd love to sit down with you and talk a little bit more maybe about what's going on in your business, what you're trying to accomplish, and possibly how I can help. Other than that, I'm just going to leave it open to questions. I'll close out of this, and I will turn off the sharing, and then we can talk. All right, I'm back. So first of all, George, thanks for stopping in. I appreciate it. Thanks, Bob. Appreciate you. You love Packers history, of course, another Wisconsin guy, so I appreciate that. Any questions so far? If hearing none, I can let you guys go. Thanks again for your time. Look forward to talking to you again soon. Everyone have a great day, and stay cool. I'd say stay warm, but it's pretty hot out there. So stay cool, stay safe. All have a good week. We'll talk to you later.